Doing well. Enjoying this warm weather. Feels a little like summer out there. Slightly concerning with the lack of rain, but otherwise, hope everybody's doing well. And I think we'll kick off with a roll call.
Foley,
Here.
Ricardo, Jones,
Present.
Cohen,
Here.
Mahan.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Rob or Kip, do you want to kick us off with any high-level comments?
Sounds good. Good afternoon, Chairperson Mahan, Mayor Ricardo, when you arrive, and committee members and members of the public. Rob Lloyd, Chief Information Officer for the City of San Jose. This month, the committee will see work in two main areas. First, we're going to start with an update on the city's major technology innovation projects and the realignment along the city roadmap adopted by Council on 3/16. Then the first of two community connectivity items will start with D2, which is a report on the city's digital inclusion status, including implementation of Wi-Fi with education partners, funding approaches, and long-term management. And then we'll end with D3, the small cell and 5G update report on 5G network construction in San Jose, progress, performance against goals, investments made in the city, and permitting improvements. With that, Michael Foster, Division Manager of the City Portfolio Projects Office, will lead us off.
Thanks, Rob. Good afternoon, Chairperson, Vice Chair, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the committee, and members of the public. I am Michael Foster, Division Manager, C3PO, here to talk about the Smart City Roadmap update. So when we last left our heroes, this is the Smart Cities Roadmap you saw in February. Just to give you a heads up, we're going to be introducing a new format today. So we're going to transition to the new city roadmap. We'll be reporting status as before on innovation and major technology projects, but now within the context of this new roadmap. And of course, the goal is to build a structure to maximize our technology investments. So here's that city roadmap approved by council on March 16th of this year. I'm sure you're familiar with this, so I won't linger on it too much. Just wanted to show you this as a reminder. Here's the policy for when professional product and project management get involved with technology projects here at the city. So greater than $500,000 involves more than one department, greater than 1 year in execution, or high profile or sensitive to the city. So taking that into account, here's the city roadmap again. And here are the areas where technology management has a role. Now the strategy and policy sections over to the right are transformed from my roadmap into core technology projects and innovation pilots sections. So this will make a little more sense on the next slide. So here are those familiar technology projects you saw before, the green and yellow squares, with some new ones mapped onto this new format. So we of course can come back to this slide, roadmap slide, but I'm going to show you in the next few slides what's changed, what's new, and what has been completed. So let's take a look. So status changes. A couple of projects have changed status. The LED smart controllers project had some past schedule slippage, but now there is an April RFP going out for these. And the building energy usage monitoring has been delayed a little bit. We still need to get the US Patent Office energy monitoring in place on that one. So the net new projects, this is a little more interesting slide. So we've got 5 net new projects here that are appearing. So in the community Wi-Fi digital inclusion area, we do have a separate project of 7 additional AT&T sponsored community centers that will be coming live in late April. There's several new housing projects that have appeared here. And I think you'll be hearing more about those later, but the most interesting one there is Project Doorway, which is a partnership with San Mateo County to be a single point of access for people looking for housing. Violent crime mitigation system. This is that pilot in the Cadillac Winchester neighborhood. And we'll be implementing the pilot with the vendor V5. I'm calling this Facebook Telegraph 2.0. It's an update of the Facebook Telegraph network. It's providing high-speed public Wi-Fi in the downtown area. So it's going to be newer hardware for a truly fast Wi-Fi. And the last one I wanted to note was the telecom expense management. This is replacing some very manual processes to save time and money with integrated billing for all of our telecom billing. And the switchover should be complete by today, actually, is the deadline I was given. So, and then the next slide, just to make it clear, is these are the recently completed projects that have dropped off of the map. So I just want to give a little kudos to folks that have done a lot of work here. San Jose 911-311 transition was, of course, completed a while back. And the separation of 311 calls to the customer contact center. The SJ311 virtual agent was completed in January of 2021, and that relieves the 311 operators for a lot of simple requests. Small cell permitting, deployment, and process improvements. That's actually in the next segment, so I will let Abby handle that for you. IT infrastructure modernization. This was moving to hyper-converged infrastructure, which is a very technical term for basically we saved a lot of space, power, and cost by doing that. And then the other two are also SJ311 related. So the language translations for the text language translations for enabling residents to write to 311 in Spanish or Vietnamese and then automatically translate that. And then the SJ311 Recycle Plus feature, which was launched in early March, adds residential garbage and recycling services. So 5 new services have appeared in the SJ311 app. And then just to be consistent, here is the Smart City Roadmap or capacity or velocity showing what we're currently doing on April projects. So 25 projects in February, moving to 31 projects in April. Just wanted to give a little hint about what's next. So we're creating a citywide detailed live status site for all of the technology projects you've seen. This is currently internal only, but this site looks at multiple metrics that are critical to the success of technology deployments. And this is in direct response to the technology deployments audit of November 2019, number 9C specifically. And then of course, obvious question, how do we know about all this stuff? Well, we need to know about all citywide technology projects that meet that C3PO criteria you saw earlier. We do this in 3 ways, with regular training and engagement with the departments, with validation with the procurement prioritization board, and of course, a validation through the budget process. And that's all I have. So any questions from the public or council? Hand it over.
Thanks, Michael. And while we wait just a few seconds to see, it looks like we do have public comment. I'll just say, appreciate the report and the like the new roadmap, and great to see all those completed projects. So why don't we head over to public comment here, and Mr. Beekman, give us just a second to get the timer up and we'll get it going.
Hi, ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, Blair Beekman here. Thank you for this item. I'm a big thank you that on your priorities list for this year in this time of COVID, that you're really considering what can be accountable practices with technology and the surveillance technology ordinance, the use of that, the use of a privacy commission. Those are 2 incredibly important concepts that it sounds like you're getting together about it and want to really explore. And you know, I have just spoken here for 5 years that open public policies working hand in hand with technology, of our technology future, is just simply the 1-2 of how to talk about sustainability for our future. And to really make those efforts towards open public policy, to invite the public, to involve the public, and make policies for the public specifically. That's the good stuff. That's the innovation. And that has to be just so vitally important. This item, you mentioned violent crime mitigation for the Cadillac area. I hope I can allowed a space and forum here to talk about surveillance and technology issues for a community. It's important. There'll be upcoming items about 4 and 5G. There's just a ton of new surveillance technology coming in with that. That needs open public policy ideas. And yeah, so I guess to conclude, you know, just as mentioned, cybersecurity, there's ideas of open public policy developing with that around the world at this time to address the future of cybersecurity. So it's not an internalized warfare, but a process of the public. I mean, that's an incredible concept. I hope you can really respect that and want to work towards those goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riekman. Appreciate those comments. Not seeing any other hands raised. Why don't we come back to the committee, and while my colleagues think about any questions or comments, Michael, I was wondering if we could put the slide, put back up the slide on completed projects for just a moment.
Let me know if that worked. That work?
Yeah, it's up. Thanks.
Okay.
And then I think you had a list of about a half dozen recently completed projects farther
Yeah, I could
down.
move forward here.
Yeah, next, there we go.
Yeah.
Great, perfect.
Completed.
Yeah, these are completed, sorry. Yeah, these are, yeah, exactly. Great to see. So I guess the question I had on this was how we measure the success of projects once they're out the door and in the wild, live in the wild, and what mechanisms we have maybe through this committee to check in on the uptake and the impact of these projects. Is there a mechanism in place for doing that?
Yeah, I would use a fantastic example is the SJ311 app. So we're getting amazing data out of that, usage data, you know, number of tickets, how long it takes to close out a ticket, et cetera, et cetera. So all that kind of data that you really want to have.
Yeah.
Especially with some of the new services, we're establishing baselines so that we can measure the growth of improvements in those services. You know, it's just to give you some little nugget statistics. When we launched, I think March 2nd, the Recycle Plus capabilities, the 5 new capabilities for garbage, we did that as a completely silent launch. You know, we just updated it. In that first day, we got 30 requests because people just noticed it on the app. So I mean, and within a week, that was in the hundreds. So you know, these things really can take off, and we need to have baselines to understand sort of what we're doing and where we're going to. One of the haulers said that I think shortly after March 11th, which was when we started promoting it, 60% of their requests were coming through the 311 app, and they used to mostly be through phone calls or calling 311.
Wow, those are great examples. Well, I guess the something I would love to see is if there's a regular mechanism through which we could come back to this committee and report back on the progress of these projects that have been completed, and say, I don't know what the right time frame is. It might be different for each project, but I know from my experience building technology, you know, being able to look over time and report back and say, well, this one exceeded expectations, or it didn't have as much impact as we expected. Here's what we learned. Just kind of surfacing some of that data and analysis for this committee might be really valuable. And so that's something I'd be really interested to see. I'll be curious to hear if any of my colleagues want to chime in on that as well. But I just think the loop closing with this group and helping us understand, okay, we shipped this thing, but now what? You know, what happened next? What did we learn? What did we gain from it? And what does it tell us for where we should go next? And I guess similarly, I'll just ask one more question and then hand it off. If we just go up one slide to new projects, do we, when we set out on these new projects, do we identify the measurable goals for them in advance so that we can then, when we do ship them and you know, track how they're performing, go back and say, well, when we first initiated this 12 months ago or however long ago it was, this is what we thought the goal ought to be, and here's what actually happened?
Yeah, that is exactly the process we do through the chartering process. So when we do any significant project, we have a charter for it, and in that charter are the things we wish to measure to measure the success of the project
Great.
and defining that success. Success means blank.
Great. And I guess what I would just suggest then, and I know Rob wants to get in on this, and then we've got somebody else who's going to chime in, but I think, I think surfacing the goals in these kinds of reports would be really valuable so that we know, okay, here's the project, the status, the summary, but also just consistently reminding us of what the goal is. What's the expected outcome that we're all driving toward would certainly be helpful for me, and I would assume my colleagues, but obviously hope they'll weigh in as well. Rob, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, just 3 points. So the two-part question, one is how do we make sure that we conclude the project and that it hit goals? And in the charter conclusion, there is on schedule, on budget, on scope quality, and the overall business value, the department says, did we hit it or not? Then the second question is long-term, does it continue to add the value and produce that we asked for? The honest truth is we haven't tracked that as much. The focus has been really on conclusion of projects and execution. Some of them do have things that we've watched, but we'll start doing that. And then the third piece is what I heard, and I've taken a note for, is to more clearly express the value of each of these projects is supposed to produce as we communicate to you in the public in these sessions. So it's not just the title, but here are the outcomes, a couple of the key outcomes we're trying to render.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, I think that's right. I think capturing a key outcome or two for each of these would be really helpful for us kind of understanding the value. And look, I think the truth is, no matter what entity or whether in government or elsewhere, we will never have 100% of projects achieve the intended outcome. And I would argue those cases are maybe even more valuable because we may learn more in those cases. So knowing, okay, well, this was the hoped for outcome. It didn't happen. Here's why. Will make us all smarter and help us see patterns and make better decisions around prioritization and goal setting going forward. So appreciate your thoughts on that and willingness to dig in a little deeper on it. But yeah, thanks, Rob.
If I could, just one piece, Kip Harkness, Deputy City Manager. I just want to give credit to both Michael and Rob on this. To be clear, none of the ability to answer any of those questions that you just asked existed as recently as 12 months ago. Wow. So we did not have a chartering process that gave us clear goals. We did not have an ability to understand when we were done with the project and whether we've achieved the measurable success. And we did not have a way of setting key metrics going forward. So both of them are sort of speaking as if it's something we've always been doing, but those are actually new capabilities that have been built actually during the pandemic, which is pretty impressive. I think the other thing that I would add to the side, I think the area where we have the most to develop is the going forward part that Rob was talking about. I remember when I worked for Dan Schulman at PayPal, one of the things he said he wanted out of the engineers that I was training was engineers who think beyond the product launch, right? And that's really powerful and really hard to do. And that's why, especially with things like the 311 services, we're trying to build in this iterative nature of understanding the data and going beyond the product launch. But there's still a lot of capability to be built there. Just want to be clear both how much has been done in the last 12 months and how much remains to be done.
Got it. No, thanks, Kip. That's helpful context and excited to hear that we're moving in that direction. That's actually a lot of great progress. Mr. Mayor.
Hey, thanks, Matt. My apologies for jumping a little late. I just want to make sure we hand Lazarus Award for the revival of the Facebook Telegraph project. It's super exciting, coming back from the dead. And I know that was a hard one to revive, but I think that's going to be really impactful once it's up and running for the work there. If you already said this, forgive me for making anyone repeat themselves, but the Homes update, what exactly Homes?
Housing loan management system.
Okay, what's that do?
So all of the housing loans for building affordable
housing loan. I'm sorry, I got you now.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I think, Mr. Mayor, I think you need a bandwidth upgrade as well, like Facebook 2.0.
Yeah.
Am I freezing on you?
You're breaking up a bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll get off then. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Okay, great. Any other comments, questions?
I'll move to accept the report.
Great. And Vice Mayor, did you have a comment or question, or was that what you were going to do? Oh, you're muted.
I guess that would help, but I was gonna move the report, but also since you asked like 3 times for your colleagues' feedback in terms of our desire to see stated outcomes, proper scoping of the projects ahead of time, and to be able to measure and benchmark the outcomes with our objectives. So I can't speak for my other colleagues, but that is something that I've wanted to see, and I know that there's been some challenges, particularly some of the projects. It's really hard to measure success. And so we just have to set our expectations in terms of what can be measured and what can't.
Right.
And I second the motion.
Great. Thanks, Vice Mayor. Okay, so Tony, I think we had a motion from Councilmember Foley and a second from the Vice Mayor, and I think we're ready to vote.
Foley,
Aye.
Ricardo,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Cohen,
Aye.
Mahan.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're on to item 2, the digital inclusion status report.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Jill Bourne, City Librarian, and I'm here today with an illustrious cross-departmental and cross-organizational team to provide you with an update on our digital equity efforts. With me today, representing Matt Kano, the Director of Public Works, is our team member, Matthew Nguyen. Also, we have Charlene Tatis from the California Emergency Technology Fund, or CETF, and Sudhir Vengati, the Products and Project Manager from the Information Technology Department. Next slide. Much of the work being reviewed today was initiated by the Digital Inclusion Branch of the EOC and was codified in the Digital Inclusion Work Plan that was approved by City Council in June 2020. A few major project areas include the build-out of the Access Eastside Community Wi-Fi program, the expansion of Wi-Fi at city facilities and parks, and an adjacent initiative which has been subsumed by this work, which is the status of the Telegraph project. As you can see, each of these infrastructure projects has at least one component completed, as indicated by a green light, one component in progress, as indicated by the yellow, and components needing significant attention or resources are indicated in red. Next slide. On the community service side of the work plan, we have the SJ Access Hotspot program for both students and the general public, and the Digital Inclusion Fund grant program. All of these projects will be reviewed in more detail today, starting with community Wi-Fi and Matthew.
Hi, I'm Matthew Nguyen, Acting Deputy Director for Public Works. I'm here in place of Matt Kano today. So as of January of this year, we have 3 projects complete already, namely James Lick, Overfeld, and Yerba Buena. In addition to this, back in November last year, with the approval of City Council, we entered into a master agreements with 3 consultants, namely SmartWave, Studio 151, and Infinity. So with the support from the consultants, we were working on the design for the 3 next projects, namely the Independence, Oak Grove, and Andrew Hill. And then, as mentioned, shown on the first slide, we also have 2 more attendance areas that we're gonna need to work on. So here's another quick look at the schedule, overall schedule of for all of the projects. So James Lake Overfeld, we complete in 2017 and 2020. Yerba Buena, we just completed a couple months ago. Independence, we're working with the consultant right now to do the design. We plan to go to construction in July and complete later in the year. So far, the first feedback from our consultant is the area is large and there's a lot of buildings and the vegetation is very dense. So we may see a little bit of the delay on the process, but we will work with them closely to make sure that we can keep up with the schedule. Andrew Hill and Oak Grove, our consultant, are working on these. So no, the schedule is shown there to be complete in February and September next year. For Silver Creek and Mount Pleasant, we're working on the funding side, and also, yeah, so we can use the same consultant that we already have master agreement with to do the planning and design. So we will save some time. And yeah, with that, next slide. Still on me? Oh. So as for the first 3 locations, I know that the team is working on the customer survey, and so we can make sure that everything is working properly. So it's being scheduled for April this year to be complete. I think most of the work is already in place. We just have to report it out. And yeah, and at the same time, we are working on the fiber run for Mount Pleasant. So we're working also with housing department to see if we can get some funding to pre-fund this. And at the same time, Eastside Union School District will try to fund a portion of this cost. And the team also working with the Eastside Union High School District to finalize the funding agreement. I think it's in the work right now. And as mentioned earlier, we are working on the independence design phase. And so, we'll try to make sure that we can keep up with that schedule that we showed earlier. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. So looking ahead as the physical infrastructure projects are moving along, our team is looking at sustainable options for long-term management of community Wi-Fi. So since the Access Eastside partnership with Eastside Union High School District commenced way before the pandemic, the partnership has deepened and accelerated significantly with the current build-out plan. So ensuring that the network is fully implemented and improved to meet residents' needs, as well as sustained over time, is a current goal, including consideration of sustainable funding models and added capacity to first ensure that our data about the need is current, relevant, and reflects the recent city and school district investments, and also identify a long-term sustainable management structure for the network. Next slide. Now, regarding the enhancement of Wi-Fi at civic facilities,
This is just
to mute.
We have everybody mute themselves other than Jill.
It sounded like my daughter, so it freaked me out a little bit. So this slide is very satisfying to us. We have completed the enhanced exterior Wi-Fi at 9 libraries and 7 community centers listed on this slide. Yay. Next slide. In addition, we added the need to seek enhanced Wi-Fi solutions at PRNS facilities that are hosting learning pods at both the Emma Prush and Leninger Center, because as we know, digital connectivity is very important for the learning pods. And then finally, we're working to ensure that other PRNS facilities are able to operate with sufficient bandwidth to support increasingly digital access services and programs. So this includes a current active project that Sudhir will describe. Sudhir.
Jill, good afternoon, Chairperson, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the committee, and the members of the public. My name is Sudhir Vengati. I'm the Projects Manager, C3PO, and I'm here to provide an update to all of you on the ongoing community efforts at some of the sites that are listed here, and also on establishing a high-speed Wi-Fi network within our at strategic corridors within our downtown area. So under the public-private partnership that city has established with AT&T, we are implementing outdoor Wi-Fi at 7 of the community centers, which are listed on this slide. As of today, we have successfully completed the construction work, obtained all the relevant permits for installing the equipment on these buildings, and also the inspections of all the 7 sites have been completed. On the project completion timeline, you see here, the installation of the Wi-Fi equipment at these sites will begin starting 7th of this month, which is next week. And we'll have 2 sites completed by the date. And then by 14th, we'll be adding 2 more additional sites. And by 21st, we will be completing the installation of all these 7 sites. And once with installation and network configuration, everything is completed by 21st, we will go through an acceptance phase, ensure that all the sites are fully operational and working as we expected before making this service available to our residents and communities. Just a couple of notes on this slide. The AT&T funded the network design part and also the construction portion at these sites. And the city staff, it's mainly public works, funded the city staff time was funded by the digital inclusion appropriation funds. Next slide, please. We are currently in the process of implementing and deploying a high-speed Wi-Fi network within the downtown area in partnership with Facebook. Back in December of 2020, we decommissioned the prototype network that has been in existence for quite some time. And that was a prototype network. And as per the demonstration agreement that we had, we decommissioned that infrastructure. And right after that, we started putting together a design for the new high-speed Wi-Fi network in collaboration with Facebook and Cambium Networks, who is the vendor for providing us this new radios, the new equipment. So the design is currently in progress. We expect to complete that in the next couple of weeks. We have completed the bid process for the contractor, and we are working through the contract award process, and we expect the contractor to come on board by sometime end of this month. And we expect the project to be completed by 24th of June of this year. And this will be rolled under the city's SJ Access program for our city's residents in downtown area. Once the network, obviously, once the construction of the network is completed, we'll be going through a thorough acceptance phase to ensure the stability of the network and it's fully operational as expected. And once we determine that, then we will start decommissioning or shutting down our existing legacy wickedly vast 5G network. So until then, just a quick note. So until then, both the networks are going to be coexisting for a brief period of time while we do the acceptance testing of the new network. And we expect to decommission the entire wickedly vast Wi-Fi by sometime middle of July, when the new network becomes fully operational. That's all from me. Back to you, Jill.
Thank you, Sudhir. So by September 2020, the library and the digital inclusion team had successfully procured 15,800 hotspots to support connectivity needs in San Jose residents and students. 12,800 were delivered to local education agencies, and 3,000 hotspots were distributed through the library's general circulation. These efforts became the start of the SJ Access initiative, with a coordinated goal of providing students and residents with access to all things digital: internet, free Wi-Fi, computing devices, and digital literacy and learning opportunities. So as part of our commitment to equity and inclusion, hotspot access was initially reserved to prioritize vulnerable community members who were underconnected or unconnected. This program provided hotspots to qualified library participants and also asked community partners, organizations, to refer their participants. The partnering CBOs were provided with multilingual outreach materials to share directly with their participants as their trusted voices locally. Also, our maker spaceship was also used to bring the library to diverse communities and facilitate access that may otherwise be limited due to transportation means and other factors. PRNS also began hosting affordable internet enrollment workshops to assist with the application process. And overall, we recognize the importance of a diverse and inclusive outreach strategy to carry the message across our many communities. We're proud of the multilingual collateral that was developed at the onset of the initiative, including postcards, flyers, banners, instructional videos, PSAs, radio segments, and partner support. So to date, we've partnered with 32 local education agencies for hotspot distribution, 22 CBOs signed up for priority reserve, and many more nonprofits, businesses, and places of worship have helped us cross-promote these efforts. As of today, we have about 85% of branch-located hotspots are checked out. Next slide. We've also been able to collect demographic information from hotspot borrowers from the library's general circulation to better understand the impact of this initiative in bridging the digital divide in San Jose. These figures are based on 676 respondents to our optional survey received at checkout of the hotspot. It should be noted that this information does not reflect the hotspots that were directed to high needs neighborhoods through local education agencies, which saw a significant concentration in the east side of San Jose. Also, as an optional survey, there's also the challenge of generalized survey fatigue and distrust of our many communities in providing this information. The library began this initiative by prioritizing the branches with the highest digital connectivity needs. The branches with the highest hotspot allocation are Alum Rock, Biblioteca Latinoamericana, Edenvale, Hillview, King, and Tully. These have a significantly higher circulation and checkout rate compared to all other library branches with express pickup. In terms of race or ethnicity, communities of color represent the largest share of the borrower demographics, with Latinx representing 42% and Asian at 40%. White residents at 15%, African American Black at 4%, American Indian Alaska Natives at 2%, and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander at 2%, Middle Eastern at 1%. Hotspot borrowers report using the hotspots for a range of activities which support education, professional development, access to services, and socializing opportunities, leading to improved quality of life. Financial challenges are a barrier to broadband internet service subscriptions, and almost 2/3 of borrowers indicate needing digital skills building support. This latter represents an important opportunity for the library and PRNS to provide through digital literacy programming and other specialized workshops. And some of the other connectivity activities that were listed include unemployment applications, stimulus payment applications, accessing news, research, online payments, housing searches, and entertainment. Half of the hotspot borrowers, approximately 51%, indicate not having current high-speed broadband subscriptions. Financial limitations are frequently cited as the barrier, and in addition to the mobile hotspots, 9 library branches and 7 community centers now have strengthened and expanded outdoor Wi-Fi as an additional connectivity option. Next slide, please. Now, the city has focused significant attention on providing immediate and long-term access to no-cost internet service through the hotspot and Wi-Fi networks. The library and PRNS are also leading a number of programs to promote low-cost internet provider options and support residents in navigating these choices. The library includes information about available internet plans and the programming and circulation interactions with their community members. PRNS has held specialized enrollment workshops for identified families that are eligible, including an overview of opportunities for broadband connections and support with the application process. And the Broadband Benefit Program from the December Federal Relief Package offers subsidy reimbursements to telecommunication providers that provide broadband plans at a discount to low-income households. As information evolves during the spring, we'll be working with our partners and school districts to connect households to opportunities for this support in advance of the next school year. And we'll also be building a unified website or landing page for sharing this type of information with the general public. And lastly, today, I'll invite Charlene Tatis to provide an update on the Digital Inclusion Fund.
Hello, thank you, Jill. Good afternoon, council members, committee members. My name is Charlene Tatis, and I am the program director for the San Jose Digital Inclusion Partnership with the California Emerging Technology Fund, partner with the city to be able to deploy the adoptions in the city of San Jose. And what I'd like to start off with here today is talk about the progress that our grantee partners have made in the last 3 quarters. So we are currently in Q4 of our first year grant cycle. And together in the first 3 quarters, our grantees have reported collectively reaching about 200,000 San Jose residents through different outreach methods, some of which Jill has discussed here today with partners like San Jose Public Library and Parks and Rec. Our grantee partners have also surveyed about 12,000 residents to understand what their needs are in relation to affordable internet access, a computing device, and digital literacy skills training. So the funnels really represent our outreach to the community, and then the surveying and residents that we've been able to identify as adoptees in our city. And so currently there are nearly 6,000 potential adoptions that have been identified, and our grantee partners have completed about 347 adoptions at the end of the third quarter. And this is our first year of grant, and so there was a significant, we had planned in there about 6 months of ramp up, and so to be at the third quarter where we are is significantly shows the efforts that our grantee partners have made to not only connect to residents, but also respond during a time where these resources are very much needed. And so if you can turn, oh, and one other thing that I'd like to mention with this slide is that Jill had also mentioned the partnerships with LEAs, schools and school districts, and I have also worked with some of our grantee partners to establish 5 official school partnerships so that families who received a hotspot are also referred to a grantee partner to receive the digital literacy skills training and support with accessing affordable devices for the family to own and use in the home. So we currently have 5 established partnerships and 2 others that we're working to establish. And those partnerships have been with some of the highest needs school districts, Oak Grove, Campbell Union School District, oh, why am I blanking on it? San Jose Unified, Berryessa. So we're really excited about those partnerships, and that has led to the significant number of adoptions, potential adoptions that are in the works. Next slide, please. We are quickly approaching our second round of grant funding, and the advisory board and council have approved up to $500,000 in funding for the second round. We have invited our current round 1 grantees to apply for funding, as we're committed to continue to learn alongside our grantees and develop the programs so that it meets the needs of the community. And we do that through communities of practice, quarterly communities of practice, and individual consultation and work with the grantees. The advisory board will go to council in mid-May to bring forward the recommendations for round 2. I believe that's it for me. So thank you. I'll hand it back to Jill.
Thanks, Charlene. This concludes our update. I want to thank and acknowledge those team members who spoke today, but also the many, many others from our departments who have made these projects happen. And before we welcome your questions, I will turn it over to Kip Harkness.
Thank you, Jill. Just a couple of dots. I wanted to play the historian on this, especially for our new members of the committee. Just a couple of things to put together. One you saw Michael talk about the approach of his team, and then you saw that in action with Sudhir and his presentation. That team is what came out of the mayor's budget message, not this year, but a year ago, to create a new capability. So all of that ability to really think of this as a portfolio of projects and products is a new capability that was funded out of council's action in response to the mayor's direction last year. We wouldn't have had the ability to tie all of these things together in the way that folks like Sudhir do so masterfully without the creation of that position in that office. The other piece, just sort of in the asterisk, he was talking, for example, about, Sudhir was talking about the public Wi-Fi in the community centers and how it's out of the partnership with AT&T, and then on the staff side funded out of the Digital Inclusion Fund. That's important to realize. The Digital Inclusion Fund is paid directly out of the fees that the telcos pay for leasing our public right of way. So there's no taxpayer dollars involved in all of this work, tip to tail, all of that public Wi-Fi, at least on the at least on the community center side, is tip to tail funded by the telco partnerships, again, which were kicked off a couple of years back. The other thing I want to do is Jill has been kind of casual about this sort of heroic level of effort that she has led both within the Emergency Operations Center and now back as city librarian had. When we found that librarians are perhaps most surprising superheroes during the pandemic in terms of the enormous capabilities that they bring in terms of language, technical capacity, geographic diversity and understanding of the city, and then willingness to do things that they've never done before, and then ability to do them exceedingly well. The digital inclusion partnership around the hotspots resulted in AT&T essentially giving us about $6.7 million of equipment and services for free as part of the deal. Part of the reason we got such great hotspots that are working so well is that Jill and her team, in particular Ann Grabowski and Abby Schul, who you'll hear from in a moment, really tested those in the real world, and were very clear that the high level hotspot that we ended up getting was the one that we needed to meet our community's needs. That was a much higher cost for AT&T, which they bore, and a much better outcome for our community, which we benefit from. So that's just one example of Jill and her team's leadership. We've also now formalized the shift of the digital inclusion and equity is going toward the library as the lead city agency on this tip to tail for very obvious reasons. And I think that's another good side benefit of what's happened with our EOC organization in the pandemic. But I just wanted to kind of put those dots together as a little bit of the amateur historian here from the city manager's office side. And with that, we're happy to take any questions, comments, and feedback that you might have.
Thanks, Kip. Appreciate that extra context. And librarians are definitely my favorite kind of superhero. So well done, Jill and the team. And thanks to Jill, Matthew, Sudhir, and Charlene for your updates. Really appreciate that. Why don't we go over to public comment and hear from the public first. So Mr. Beekman, ready when you are.
Hi, thank you. Blair Beekman here. Thanks for this item. This digital inclusion slowly developing. Thank you. President Biden just spoke yesterday of a whole new set of infrastructure ideas. A lot of broadband things will be included with that. I thought it was interesting. Renewable energy is a part of that too, by the way. That's renewable energy ideas. And with the broadband issues coming up in this latest package efforts from the federal level, they also interestingly have a important component about healthcare services that I found interesting. I don't know, I don't quite know the depth of it yet, but it's depth. So thank you, because we have a lot to deal with building our digital future and our digital inclusion future, as important as it can be. I can't stress enough how I talk about how open public policy ideas can really help the digital inclusion process. And so people do not feel overwhelmed by this process. And these things are coming in a time of COVID that I find a bit overwhelming. And I think open public policy is the most honest measure of how to measure our sustainability for the future. And to teach our children that is just vitally important. for our future. And then they can learn the ideas of what digital inclusion can be about and what that can offer them. And I feel it should work in that order. And it's a matter of trust. How do we learn to trust open public policy can work together with digital inclusion? Can you trust that idea? Do you want to work those ideas? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, back to the committee. Councilmember Foley.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. And Kip, thank you for the history lesson. It really is important to recognize what Jill and her team did in creating the accessibility that our kids needed so desperately last year and so quickly. It was when we went into shutdown and all of a sudden kids were sent home and didn't have access to technology, and that's where they were supposed to learn. You and your team and city manager's office and jumped into place to really push forward the digital inclusion fund and make sure that kids all over the city had access to both the technology and the Wi-Fi access, not just the tools, just the devices that they needed to as well. So I am so grateful for that. And I know that there's still technology or there's still access issues as evidenced by the mayor's difficulty in sometimes getting on a really strong Wi-Fi system where he is, but maybe he's using that wickedly Wi-Fi system that isn't all that good. So just a huge kudo to you, Jill, and your team. And I know that the school districts are all grateful, and that more importantly, our children have the access they need, but we're not finished. So I have some questions regarding the East Side Union High School District funding, the bond, and how is the agreement coming together as Superintendent Funk gets ready to retire? Is there someone taking his place with the same drive and passion that he is? I'm very concerned about that situation.
Thank you, Councilmember Ann Grabowski, Assistant Director of the Digital Inclusion Branch. And don't know yet who is replacing Superintendent Funk, and we'll all be sad to see him go. In fact, at every meeting, he reminds us how many board meetings he has left. We are moving quickly with the expertise of Reggie Nair, who's on this call, and I'll ask to answer in detail soon, to get that agreement to council so that it is penned under his leadership before he exits the district. So Reggie, do you have anything else to add?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. Where we are right now, the agreement has there's two agreements, one for the new sites that we will be building at Independence, Oak Grove, Andrew P. Hill, and Mount Pleasant and Silver Creek. So that's under a new agreement. That has been sent to Eastside Union, and they're currently working, we're working with their council to finalize that agreement. It does need to go to their board first to get approval. Chris has told us that he will not be there in June, so please get it as soon as possible. So definitely aware of that. And once they approved, we will go to our council. We are still working with our finance team with regards to updating the other agreement, which is currently an existing agreement that's active, and that is to cover for James Lick, Overfelt, and Herba Buena. Right now, we're just trying to, collaborate with them as to the prioritization of that one. That one still is valid until 2022, but I know Superintendent Chris Funk wants both of them there. So we're working that detail out on the existing. So that's where we are.
So just to follow up on the other schools then, Independence, Andrew Hill, Oak Grove, Silver Creek, and Mount Pleasant, they'll be involved in the new agreement?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Well, good luck and Godspeed with that contract. I hope it gets through by the end of May too. I don't know how often their school board meets. Jill, with regard to the demographic report statistics that you gave us, did you, we have really good ethnicity numbers and what the connectivity activities were, but did we do a study or survey based on age?
I believe that we do have some sense of age. I do think, again, it is skewed to because a lot of student households would have received the hotspot through their schools. But we did focus on trying to reach partner providers that could reach hard to reach seniors, for instance. So I will, if we don't have the data right now, I'll make sure to make that available to the council.
I appreciate that. That's the age group that I'm very focused on, is our seniors and their access to devices and hotspots or Wi-Fi access as well. And also, you mentioned skills building. I think no one needs more skills building as it relates to technology than seniors. It's very intimidating for them, and they, while we may have millennials around us or younger, our 5-year-olds who are really good at it, those who are 60 and above, and I put myself in that group, it's intimidating to us and it's difficult for us to try to get our heads wrapped around some of it. So are we planning, when we're doing any skills building, reaching out to our senior population as well?
Yes, in fact, and our team has developed both online curricula that are easily accessible, but also, again, working through partner organizations that work with seniors and trying to find ways to get resources into senior households. So what we'll do is we can provide the council with a list in our next update of the organizations we've worked with. And if any council members have other suggestions for, willing participants or willing organizations, we will definitely reach out to them. And then lastly, as our libraries are able to reopen, we know that during the daytime before after school is when our seniors use our libraries the most. And so we're looking forward to being able to serve them again.
Thank you. And I look forward to that too, because they will be able to go into the library and get access to that. Any idea on when that's going to happen?
I probably shouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
Kick me.
One of us would follow up with that.
Yeah, we actually have plans. We've been approved to open 2 tech centers in the next week. And then we're going to see how it goes. And I'll let Kip pipe in.
Yeah, the library has really good plans on the tech center side. Like as Jill said, we'll pilot it with 2, make sure we got it all squared away, expand it to 5. I think in terms of more significant openings of services inside, much of that will wait until we are in the next stage or beyond on that. So just want to temper that. We have had a deliberately intentional and cautious approach about indoor services, and it's paid off in terms of the risk factor, but we're looking to the next stages for more robust indoor services. So the technology pieces that Jill has been championing, I think, are going to be very safe and very useful, and I think we'll scale from 2 to 5 pretty quickly.
Okay, thank you. And when we're, just to follow up on the seniors a little bit, when we're talking about online training for them, they may have trouble just doing that. So yeah. It's a simple,
that's why
I turn on my device. Well, we're, how to, and some are really easy, but it's just getting them to think differently. And I'm actually thinking of my mom and others of her age. My mom's passed away a couple of years ago, but I remember how difficult technology is for her. And I know it's just getting more complicated for seniors. So maybe we could also work with the senior commission, because I know they're very anxious and willing to help get information out to senior population. Okay. So I thank you for thinking about that and focusing on that. Okay, and then I have what may seem like an obvious question, but for me, someone who's fairly new to this committee, can someone explain in layman's terms what Facebook Telegraph is?
Ooh, can I try? So,
layman's terms, Kip.
Layman's terms, Kip.
Okay, so when you build out a Wi-Fi network, there are a couple of aspects that you need in a Wi-Fi network. One of them is essentially, how do you transmit the information over longer distances at a very, very high volume? And typically that's done with fiber or fiber optic cables. What the Facebook Telegraph technology does is creates a point-to-point straight line through the air version of fiber that allows you to, say, attach something to a traffic light and another sign to a traffic light and shoot a beam in between the two of them, and that has a very, very high speed and very, very high bandwidth. And so what that allows us to do is then have the equivalent of over-the-air fiber and then transmit that to more normal Wi-Fi access points and radios that will distribute the Wi-Fi and bathe the Wi-Fi in the areas. The advantage of that, and there are several, are that it allows us to do that without tearing up the street. It also allows us sometimes to get in areas which we couldn't otherwise access because of the way that we can direct the radios and the beams. And because Facebook has been very generous, it also allows us to have that technology for free because they provided us with that technology and those equipment needed to do that. Now, there are a bunch of other people who know a hell of a lot more than I do, so I'm going to allow Matthew, Reggie, or Ed Kim, or anybody else to correct what I might have just messed up. But that was my attempt at a plain English version of Facebook Telegraph.
Anyone else? That was really helpful. Thank you so much.
Can I jump in as the least knowledgeable person just to offer a little more perspective? You know, Facebook has been trying to make big bets on connectivity globally to figure out what's the best technology to do this. And, you know, we've all been probably reading about everything from balloons to satellites. And this was one of those projects that Facebook was engaged in probably 5 or 6 years ago, if I have it right, Kip.
Yep.
And you know, they had taken on this challenge from Prime Minister Modi to link digital India, and this was one of their efforts to figure out how could we do it in a dense urban area. And so this is really, it started as a demonstration platform to see if this could work, and we were happily the guinea pig, or perhaps the laboratory, more elegantly.
Yeah, and just to stay on with the historian version, one of the unintended consequences is we learned a heck of a lot around putting things up on poles, which was at the time extremely annoying, painstaking, and really head-banging kind of work. But what it did is when the small cell work came, which you'll hear more about shortly, we had an understanding of what we needed to do and not do. And so it was fortuitous in its timing and allowed us to learn a lot about putting high technology up on poles in the most efficient way. So Facebook really gave us a double or triple gift in that regard.
That's a wonderful explanation. Thank you, Kip, and thank you, Mayor, for all of that. I have to ask, we're not giving away any access to any of our data or our community's data for any of this.
Our privacy guidelines apply to this, and we're making sure that people have their privacy as they use this network.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. That concludes my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, council member. All right, let's go to council member Cohen.
Thank you. First of all, Kip, that was a great layperson's description. I enjoyed that, especially the shooting the beams from one to the other. But I did, when I first had the old days of cable TV, one of the options was a dish that received direct signal from the tower, so you didn't have to have wires into your house. And we had that. It was it actually worked really well. But the problem is you had to have direct sight to wherever the tower was. So we had to be able to see Mission Peak from our house for it to work. But this is great when it's shorter distance, and I love the technology. I want to thank you, Jill, and all your staff for the great report. As you know, libraries were my original San Jose love, so I'm excited to hear from you and your staff. I'm excited about how fast you've been moving on the deployment of all of these projects, especially the community Wi-Fi and getting all of the community centers and libraries wired. You know, I was excited also last year in one of my last few months as a board member in Berryessa to vote to help fund it, because the elementary districts are also chipping in for the areas that cover their district. So it was great that we're helping fund, Berryessa is helping fund the Independence deployment. And I'm excited to see the timeline is, you know, coming pretty soon for Independence. It's a large area and a lot of need. I do have a question about usage for those deployments, both at sites and for community Wi-Fi? Is there are you tracking how many people are logging in and how often it's used? Is there any way to tell?
Yeah, in the local networks at the different sites, we would be able to see sort of like the hits, I believe. I don't have that data on me, but that's something we can look at.
And council member, just to add to Jill's statement, we are working on aggregating that information as well as the customer service feedback information that that went live and I think closed yesterday, so that we can understand, of the data that we're receiving about usage, we're also receiving experiential data about areas where things aren't going so well, so that we can correlate those and have a better sense of where we need to do more work.
Yeah, one of the questions I had originally when we discussed this at our school board was the bandwidth limitations, like how many users can be on at a time, when will you end up experiencing slowdowns and traffic problems? I assume we don't have enough usage yet to reach that kind of capacity problem, but I am concerned about how that will play out as more and more people discover this in their neighborhoods and start to use it. So we should be tracking that and understanding how people are experiencing it.
Right, and I apologize, Councilmember. I first thought you were only talking about the city building Wi-Fi, and so so that's that. But with the east side, that has been a concern from the beginning, that we understand the usability, especially in the home, and that the bandwidth is enough to support things like distance learning. And what we now understand is that pretty high level of speed and volume allowed or permitted. So we actually budgeted within the digital inclusion plan that we took to council in the spring, an additional amount that is kind of a little bit extra to ensure that we can add additional nodes or additional whatever those things are called, Kip, so that when we find out that there's a certain street or a certain block that is having lower success rates, that we can have more sort of surgical implementation to fix those. We're also working closely with the schools, and I think we get some feedback, and then we work with the district to ensure that we're figuring out where the problems are and sort of piloting new ways to fix them.
Access points, and yes, and we also are looking at in the areas where extending the Wi-Fi network doesn't make sense, either providing hotspots or now with especially the changes at the federal level on access to broadband, getting the individual households signed up for an affordable in-home solution, because the Wi-Fi has limitations, especially in areas that might have odd topography or difficult to reach building. And so that's part of, as Jill was saying, spending the extra time now that the system is up to understand where it works and where it doesn't, and be realistic about its limitations, but not accept them as the end of getting people connected.
Right. Those access points would be the nodes that shoot the beams. Yeah.
Exactly.
Anyway, so that was my question about extendability. Like, how is the system extendable if we find that we have areas that need extra need or are having bandwidth limitations? And I guess you kind of answered that, and we'll feel that out as it goes along. But I'm interested to hear reports as this continues to get used. My follow-up question on that is, how are people getting notified when this is available? And so, obviously it can be done through schools, but besides that, how will the public know that they have access to this kind of build out in their neighborhoods, and for people who need it, learn how to actually connect to it?
So I can answer part of that, which is, working through our partner organizations and the school district to get the word out through the library and the city and all the different notification systems that we have. But we are building a unified landing page that we sort of first realized when the last attendance area came online, this issue of, if we could spread out the word about the landing page, about the network, where does somebody go to learn about how to use it, how to log on, and then also get connected to other city services and other partner services. So we have a prototype of a landing page, and you'll be hearing more about it soon. And the goal is then to sort of push that out to the residents as each different attendance area comes online.
And so for those of us who represent Eastside residents who are part of this, we could be using our offices to help promote and send it out. Although I recognize the problem with using a digital newsletter to promote something that's helping people get connected that may not currently be connected, but could be other ways for us to promote it. And certainly having those maps that show what neighborhoods have access would be helpful to us so that we can say, okay, if you're in this area, this is how you do it. And this is what the network's called and how you connect to it, right?
Right.
If I go on Wi-Fi on my device, all my neighbors' things show up and I wouldn't necessarily know which one's the city's Wi-Fi system that I can connect to and how do I do that?
Yeah, and we've been working with the IT department and others to ensure things like that, like making sure that it's a uniform nomenclature for the districts as they come online, that we have simple instructions for folks to be able to utilize it. And then we're able to get feedback as well. So I think more to come on that.
Okay, thank you. That's good. And just to follow up on Councilmember Foley's question about age, I assume that many of the people checking out these devices are checking out for family use, right? So it's not necessarily that it's specifically for somebody that's a senior or somebody who's a student, but that they're a family that doesn't have access at all, and many family members want to share access to the network. Right?
And that's a really great point. And we found that to be true, that because we have the high quality hotspot that Kip mentioned, it is able to be used by multiple people at the same time. And that was the intent. And so, whether there's a student in the household, but there's multiple generations in a household, everybody's using it for a different need.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Council Member. Let's go to Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, I want to commend Kip and Jill and the whole team for doing an amazing job of closing the digital divide. I'm very involved with the National League of Cities Information Technology and Communications Committee. And I can tell you that I spend a lot of time bragging about San Jose and what we've accomplished. And also I'm able to compare what we're doing to all the other cities that are involved. And I can tell you that we are literally light years ahead in terms of what we've accomplished and what we're doing compared to other cities. Jill, libraries are very near and dear to my heart. As you know, my mother was a librarian and I grew up, hearing about the Dewey Decimal System. So don't ask me why that's still burned into my head, but I just have so much respect for what you do. And on the subject of goals and outcomes, this has been one of my highest priorities. And our goal was to make sure that every student who needed broadband access had it. So my question is, do we accomplish that goal? From the feedback and information you've got from the schools, did we reach that goal of providing broadband access to every student that needed it?
That's a great question. So we developed these strong relationships with all the school districts, and our team has been incredible in terms of following up on regular communication and doing formal and informal information gathering. And I can tell you for the last part of this school year, for at least the last several months, what we understood is that there was no more need for hotspots to fill that gap. So we had enough saturated in the districts to fill that need. And in fact, we recently completed an agreement with the County Office of Ed that allowed for county office funded hotspots to be utilized out of within their districts, but out of the borders of San Jose, because they had students that they serve outside of San Jose that may need those hotspots, whereas the students in San Jose were covered. So a long way to say, from our feedback, we understood that the need was met. That is to say, it is a temporary solution, and we knew that all along. And so now we're working closely with the districts to figure out what solutions we can develop that for year 2 and on, and what more permanent solutions can come into play. And it also, I think it's a challenging environment for the districts, but we gave the access. Whether or not is utilized to the extent that the school wishes it was, is something that we're continuing to work with them on.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Kip.
And I would just add that you created constant and enormous pressure to meet the goals that we have met. There were many, many days where I heard your voice in my head about what about when they get back to school in August. And so you had your very, very key role in making sure that we did this in a timely fashion.
Well, Kip, this is a perfect segue for me to ask you to withdraw that restraining order that you put out against me.
No chance.
Good work, Vice Mayor. I know Mayor Liccardo, you need to get to another meeting, right? You want to chime in?
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. I just had a couple quick questions. Based on what we think we know about connectivity to our students, how far behind are we still on devices? How many thousand kids do we think still need devices that don't have them?
I'm going to ask Anne if we have, what's the latest we have from the county office on that?
Joe, I can.
Is here with me. To share that we are at under 1,000 devices in need right now in San Jose, and I believe the latest tranche of funding from the emergency fundraising operation through the Digital Inclusion Fund should meet that need. And so we're thinking that need will be exhausted, contingent upon supply chains and a few other factors, but that the city has provided the funding to meet the need as we know it.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for multitasking. And certainly great work all around for everybody. This is one of the great successes of our city over the last year. I just wanted to go into the hardware for a moment on the east side, because, if there's one thing I've learned and all the work we've done, the innovation team over the last several years, is hardware is really hard. And we know that the signal is not perfect in the east side, and I've heard the anecdotal complaints from some. And I have two questions really. One is, do we have any sense about what percentage of homes are actually getting a signal inside the home so that a student could be able to use it inside the home in those catchment areas where we've set up the Wi-Fi?
I'm not sure that we have good data on what's available inside the home yet. That's one of the things that our customer service survey aims to understand. And since it closed yesterday, we're digesting that data right now. And we'll probably do several other targeted surveys to really understand in areas of need, expanding the sample size in areas that we understand are problematic and diving deeper. But the initial survey results indicated that a significant portion of those that responded were able to access the signal in the home. So we're going to do some additional work on that and should have something by the close of the fiscal year that is, able to be understood and could be actionable for us.
That's great. And do we have any? I'm guessing the answer is no, but is it possible for us? I know we've measured the total amount of data that's been being used in the system, and that seemed really promising. But are we able to actually learn anything about the geography of where that use is, so that we can readily determine, we have a problem over here because nobody's been online for the last 2 days?
I believe that the short answer is yes, but I'm going to kick it over to Ed Kim to fully answer that question.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yes, thank you. Yes, so the answer is yes.
And I think you're breaking up.
To ensure that we're actually getting some concrete data. Oh, I'm sorry, the connection here is really bad. The connection that we
Hopefully you're not using the east side
we're able to provide. No. The data that we actually
Ed, we might have to come back to you. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, we'll come back. Okay.
Location and proximity. All of the devices. Okay.
Yeah, Ed, with your video off, go ahead and try again. That might be working.
Okay. Is everyone able to hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. Thanks.
Okay. Very good. So, what I was mentioning was the way that the data is being collected is on a per device basis, which is determined, and it is collected based on the proximity of each attendance area. And so the short answer is, in fact, yes. In fact, we have been collecting the data. We're just trying to figure out a means to be able to translate that based on each attendance area. So we are working towards getting that data, yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ed. I appreciate all the work that's being done on the east side on the Wi-Fi network, because I know there's been a lot of efforts, obviously, with the mobile hotspots and so forth, but it's in that Wi-Fi network that we're really making big bets, it seems to me, and the prospect of being able to connect 300,000 residents is just tremendous. And I just want to make sure as we're rolling it out, we're really connecting the people we think we're connecting. And so I appreciate all that information. And by the way, Ann Grabowski, your daughter's adorable. The last question I had related to the downtown high-speed network. And again, super excited to see this revive with Telegraph. But I looked at the geography on that slide, and it looks like we got a whole bunch of nodes along Santa Clara Street, virtually nothing along San Fernando. And I'm just wondering, knowing nothing about the geometry of how we aligned all this and so forth, yeah, I'm just concerned about, for example, be a lot of restaurants along San Fernando would love to have folks outdoors being able to use free Wi-Fi. Is there a reason why we're so heavy along Santa Clara and not so much south of that?
I was going to ask Ed or Sudhir.
Yeah, or just to throw out another example, in SOFA, we've got 2 or 3 nodes, but I think that's an area where we really want to encourage a lot of outdoor activity, cultural and artistic related, and would love to see super good Wi-Fi in that area too.
Yeah, I can weigh in on that one.
Yes.
Rob Lloyd, CIO for the city. So we mapped out actually the highest use areas, and we followed the patterns of use when we did that map, and then had the areas that we were willing or able to get the donation for was from there. There actually was originally a larger footprint, but this is what we could actually get agreement on. We can expand it and extend it if need be. It's just a matter of getting the resources to make those investments, and then also to sustain those, so we don't end up with another wickedly fast Wi-Fi scenario. But we followed the existing use patterns and some ambitions for public events in certain areas.
Okay. So I'm just looking at, say, San Carlos and 3rd Street, where we'd expect a lot of San Jose State students who want to be hanging out, eating yogurt outside or a burrito or something. And there's just nothing there. And I'm wondering, does that mean they're not going to get a signal, or do we think they'll get a signal?
Or they have other coverage, sorry, and they were using other methods, but we could see the utilization that was extant at that time. But I'd invite Ed if he wants to weigh in additionally on any other factors went into those decisions.
Yeah, so some of the factors that were actually taken into effect were, it was a discussion that we had with economic development to determine where those key hotspot locations are. And one of the attempts that we're trying to continue to improve on, so Mayor, just to clarify, what you're seeing on the map is where what Kip defined as the back hall actually extends to. The actual Wi-Fi could potentially extend beyond where those dots are actually shown. So
that's just where the fiber
again, what we're looking to those air fiber, the Telegraph nodes are. That's correct.
Okay.
I would suggest 2 things. One, we'll come back with a more complete coverage map as we build it out. And we definitely have the ability to iterate on this contingent on funding.
Cool.
So that, having built this, it's not a static network. It can be dynamic and can be expanded. And certainly we want to go where the people are. That's, I think that's a key priority for all of us.
Well, thanks for all the information and for all the great work. Appreciate it.
I'm tempted to go do a walking test and just bring my device out and see where I can get signal as I walk around.
There you go.
Yeah, try it with a 5G device as well, too. So,
thank you, Mayor. Okay, great. Only question I had, which was I think it was touched on, but I'd love to get a little more information, is just ongoing maintenance costs for each of these different systems and who's responsible. And so my sense is that for, if I heard correctly, for the community, the East Side Access, we're trying to partner with the school district to take on at least all or part of that cost burden. But for something like downtown, has Facebook made an ongoing commitment, or do we pick up the tab for that over time? Can we just kind of go through hotspots? I know are kind of low capital investment, but for the others, what's the status of ongoing maintenance costs?
I'll start with one element, which is the civic building. So we did work with the IT team to estimate what's the ongoing cost to maintain the service, the enhancements, and then trying to build that into our future budgeting. And so I think a similar activity is happening with the Wi-Fi network through Access East Side, but I will let our IT folks answer that.
Yeah, so there are three answers, and Jill got it. The one that's still lingering the most, assuming that the agreement with Superintendent Funk and Access East Side gets completed, and we do have the schedule of costs for civic buildings, but the replacement of Wickley Fast Wi-Fi is a one-time gift from Facebook. So we still need to do some long-term planning of what that network looks like and where the costs are born. It's what happened to Wickley Fast Wi-Fi. It was a one-time project, not sustained, and so you saw the degradation over time. We have ambition and want not to do that again, but there's more work to be done on that network.
But Rob, can you talk a little bit about the school districts and the operations and maintenance there, assuming the passage of the different pieces?
Yes, so we did work with Jill and Reggie and others on that to identify what the long-term carrying costs of that network would be. And to give Reggie a lot of credit on representing those needs in those negotiations. So Reggie, correct me if I'm wrong, was it $100,000 per attendance area on an ongoing basis?
It's about 50,000 for each attendance area. It's only for 200 nodes, 200 streetlight locations. So it's very limited within an attendance area. In addition, Eastside Union is going to be contributing for a technology refresh because obviously equipment fades over, it degrades over time. So they're committed also to providing about 450,000 in the next 5 years. So that's the long-term goal, that we're, negotiating right now. So they're committed to providing that support.
Right. Okay, great. And Rob, for the piece that we have not quite figured out yet, do you have a timeline for when are you planning to bring that forward as part of the current budget process, or would that come up after that?
We have it in the some numbers for that, but to be honest, Chair, is we just came up with those numbers back in January. We are doing the work right now. We'll finalize what those numbers are, but channel through Kip and Jill on what those costs long term would be. But we'll respect the budget process on that.
Great. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I asked because I get yelled at about potholes every day, and I figure as we add new infrastructure, we ought to make sure we're planning ahead for maintenance and really make sure we feel like the budget can sustain it. So I'm very interested in that topic and look forward to learning more. But and Reggie, thanks for your great work on that. So I think unless there are any other questions or comments. Oh, Councilmember Foley, yes.
I just wanted to move to accept the report.
Thank you. We have a second? Great. All right, let's vote.
Foley,
Aye.
Liccardo, Jones,
Aye.
Cohen,
Aye.
Mahan.
Aye. Great. All right, we are on to our third and final item, which is the small cell and 5G update report.
For that item, we have Abby Shull here to present.
Thank you, Rob. Let me just get this back into full screen. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, if you're still here, Chair Member Mahan, committee members, and members of the public. I'm Abby Shull, Assistant to the City Manager in the Office of Civic Innovation. I'm excited to be here to share an update on small cell and 5G. I'll take us through some background, the partnership agreements, our deployment goals, timeline, and progress, permitting process improvements, public engagement, and our next steps. So what is 5G? It is the next step mobile technology, the 5th generation of telecommunications infrastructure. Mobile technology has made a leap approximately every 10 years. In the 1980s, we had 1G, which brought mobile voice. In the 1990s, we had 2G, which expanded mobile voice and improved call quality. In the 2000s, we got 3G, which brought mobile data. And in the 2010s, 4G arrived, providing mobile broadband, which improved availability, performance, and quality that led to new unforeseen services like rideshare, micro-mobility mobile rental scooters and bikes, and food and grocery delivery services. And the 2020s are the age of 5G, which brings tremendous bandwidth, speed, low latency, and will enable and usher in yet new yet unimagined services and businesses. So why is 5G important and necessary? Tens of billions of devices are connected to the mobile network, home, car, and personal devices, and US households have an average of 10 connected devices. 40% of US internet traffic is from mobile devices, and throughout the COVID pandemic, mobile data traffic has grown by 50%. The old network technology and infrastructure does not have the performance and capacity needed to meet the mobile demands of today and into the future. 2G and 3G networks are expected to sunset by the end of 2022 as they are upgraded to 4G and 5G to meet the speed and capacity needs over the next decade. The city is taking a citywide approach to deploying 5G, and to do so has entered into public-private partnerships. We have small cell agreements with AT&T and Verizon to deploy 4,000 antennas on city-owned streetlights, fiber optic line agreements with AT&T, Verizon, and Comcast for the network backhaul that supports their services, and a newly executed macro cell agreement with T-Mobile to upgrade 200 existing cell sites and construct 40 new sites. So what are small cells, macro cells, and fiber? Small cells are low-powered, short-range, 200 to 300 feet wireless network antenna. They're small compared to macro cells and can be installed on streetlights like the one pictured here on the left. Small cells enhance cellular network coverage and capacity and are installed within blocks of one another to augment and complement macro cell coverage in densely populated areas. Macro cells are high-powered, wide area coverage antenna mounted on towers, like the two photos in the center, or on rooftops, like the photo on the upper right, and have a range of a half mile to 25 miles. Small cells and macro cells need a connection to a mobile carrier's core network called backhaul. Fiber wireline networks provide this connection. And fiber is increasingly being used instead of copper, both pictured on the lower right, because fiber offers high speed and higher performance compared to copper. Our partnerships bring over $1 billion in private network investment in San Jose at zero cost to the city and taxpayers, and provide the telecom companies fast and predictable permit processing. In addition, small cell lease fees go towards the city's Digital Inclusion Fund, which supports closing the digital divide for unconnected residents in San Jose. Other partnerships and benefits have also stemmed from our small cell partnerships, including being the first city to deploy FirstNet citywide for emergency communications with best available pricing, and smart cities pilots and initiatives, including AT&T sponsored youth and senior digital literacy programs, community Wi-Fi at several community centers, smart lighting at several parks, and 15,000 digital inclusion hotspots. And Verizon sponsored STEM programs for elementary, middle, and high school students, intersection safety analytics to support Vision Zero, traffic data services for smart traffic management, and Verizon Connect to manage the city's vehicle fleet. Within the small cell and macro cell agreements, we have goals and timelines for swift permitting to fully enable network construction. Starting with small cell, the overall scope is to permit 4,000 sites within 10 years, so by 2028. The small cell permit review timeline target is 30 days from intake to permit issued, and the goal for number of permits issued per week is 30 permits. So far, 1,850 permits have been issued, which is 46% of the 4,000 total target. And on average, small cell permit reviews are complete within 12 days and up to 38 permits issued per week. The small cell team has been nimble and quick to adapt to permitting during the pandemic, thanks to digitizing the process as part of earlier process improvements. The team also issued a record 153 permits in April 2020 during the early days of shelter in place. The digitization of small cell permit processes also enabled other development services work groups to quickly pivot to remote permitting during the pandemic. For macro cell, we are in the ramp up phase right now, and the overall scope is to permit 240 sites. 40 site scope is broken into two types of permits that move at different speeds. 200 site modification permits to upgrade existing sites, and 40 new site permits to construct a new site, which has more steps and takes more time. For the 200 modification permits, the goal is to complete permit review within 5 days and to issue 17 permits per week. And for the 40 new site permits, the target is to review each permit within 30 days and issue 3 per week. We are nearing the end of the ramp up phase and anticipate meeting these goals by the end of April. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the city's Emergency Operations Center activated the Digital Inclusion Branch, focused on connectivity for San Jose households without internet. This map was created to help determine the relative need for digital access by census tract based on key criteria like K through 12 enrollment, poverty rate, households without a computer, households without internet access, and limited English proficiency. Each census tract has a score based on these criteria. The higher the score, the greater the need and higher priority. The bright fuchsia pink colored tracts are the very high priority areas. The light pink and purple tracts are high priority, and the blue and light blue are priority. Overall, 45% of the city is either very high or high priority as measured by census tracts. Through our partnerships, we are working with AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile to facilitate permitting and support equitable network deployment in these priority areas. Of the 1,850 permitted small cell sites, 50% are in very high and high priority areas. 230 permits are for sites in very high priority areas, and 698 permits are for sites in the high priority areas. All of this work and the permitting speed and predictability that makes San Jose a model that our partners are proud to point to is due to the incredible small cell team and macro cell team. Huge thanks and gratitude to everyone on these teams. Without them and their hard work, this permitting excellence simply is not possible. I would like to directly thank a few people. Liz Koki, my go-to guru on the small cell team, for her leadership and masterful coordination. And on the brand new macro cell team, Stephanie Farmer, planner, who stepped up to be the team's technical lead and permit expediter, and Leslie Damondon for taking the lead on building permit coordination. Tremendous thanks to them and to these teams. The small cell team has cemented process improvements that deliver a fast and predictable permit process. Here, the checkmarked items are complete and circles are in process. Highlights include the GIS small cell map to share information hosted on the city's website, coordination between the carriers, Public Works, and Department of Transportation to plan fiber projects ahead of paving projects to avoid moratoriums, bi-weekly construction and engineering meetings with the carriers, and quickly pivoting to supporting remote inspections to keep construction moving during COVID-19. The macro cell team ramp up began in late December 2020 with assembling the cross-departmental team and conducting several workshop meetings to identify process improvements with T-Mobile. Regular meetings for permit coordination and goal planning have been set up, and electronic plan review processes are in place. We're currently ramping up towards 20 permits per week and getting the permit review time to within 5 days for site upgrades and 30 days for new sites. We will also continue to iterate to improve on templatized designs, sharing and tracking information, and resourcing inspections as construction gets started on permitted sites. With the small cell deployment nearly at the halfway point, we continue to hear some resident concerns about the small cell permitting process, locations, and perceived health concerns that fall under the Federal Communications Commission's purview. Since the start of the deployment, the city has logged 180 public inquiries. We attribute the relatively low number of inquiries to our high-quality designs, 20-day notice requirements, and consistent procedures, including maintaining an up-to-date small cell frequently asked questions webpage at sanjoseca.gov/smallcell. The webpage clarifies the city's control over the design and engineering and the fact that the FCC preempts cities from denying permits due to health concerns. The FCC and other federal health and safety agencies actively monitor and investigate health effects and have reasserted the safety of the current FCC radio frequency exposure limits. For next steps on small cell, it is to sustain permit reviews and prepare to ramp up when our telecom partners are ready to increase permit submittals. Currently, their focus is on constructing the 1,850 sites already permitted and anticipate a return to high-volume permitting later this year or early 2022. With the focus on construction, resources are being aligned with inspection support and coordination on maintenance permits. For macro cells, it's continuing to ramp up to meet the 20 permit per week target and the 5 and 30-day review timeline goals. Last but not least, to support these teams and the ongoing process improvement work, the Office of Civic Innovation will soon recruit and hire a broadband permitting project manager who will be the functional lead and relationship manager overseeing the agreements. I'll now turn it over to Kip and Rob.
Thank you, Abby. If you could go back to that wonderful map and the stats for just a second, I want to close out with a couple of pieces. So, this is one of the concerns in any infrastructure deployment is the equity of that infrastructure. And traditionally, with telecommunications infrastructure in particular, it has tended to go to where the market is and therefore where the high income areas are, and often leave behind whole neighborhoods and whole communities which may not have the same financial resources that others do. Part of what we set out to do when we did the agreements and the partnership was to make sure that that was not replicated with the deployment of 5G. So rather than just doing permitting on an individual basis, we did a citywide permitting piece. And part of what we did from the beginning and then doubled down on during the pandemic was the idea that we wanted to make sure that the connectivity was going into the neighborhoods for whom connectivity was now absolutely vital on everything from education to getting access to information about COVID. So I'm really pleased with the statistics that you see here. I just want to focus on the bottom red as an example. So if we had deployed small cells, strictly speaking, just by geography, you would expect about 2% of the small cells to be in the very high need neighborhoods. Instead, you see 12% are in those very high need neighborhoods. And what that represents is both writing a historical gap in that some of those neighborhoods were among the worst in terms of connectivity, and also keeping an eye on digital inclusion and digital equity to make sure that students and others who need to be connected during the pandemic and during normal days were. So I'm really, really proud of the team's work that's displayed on this map. The other thing that this team has done, which the timing again was fortuitous on, is with their rigorous approach to both digital online work in terms of the permitting and processing and the collaborative work with their partners, they pointed the way for much of the rest of our development services to rapidly move to digital about a year and a half in advance of when they were planning to. When the pandemic struck. We had the small cell team, if you will, was the tip of the spear on testing out those digital processes, and we knew they would work and we knew how to scale them based on our effective work of the small cell team. So we appreciate the team both for the actual work that they've done in making sure all of San Jose is connected, and also in helping us think about digital services and digital permitting for the larger development services team. So just wanted to add those 2 points on. Rob, anything you want to add as we close?
No, I think you nailed it, Kip.
Great, thanks, Kip, and Abby, thanks for the very focused and substantive presentation. That was great. Why don't we go over to public comment? And first we have Mariana. Is it Mariana or Mariana?
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, so my name is Mariana Damien. I have a master in microelectronics, so I know what I'm talking about here. I'm not complaining about 5G. What I'm complaining, it is about the devices that are installed currently. And this is because they are not standard, not tested by the FCC above 3G on rats in 1996. And this is why they are saying that codes at the present time, no concluded studies have been reported to have a health impact. But they are thousands and thousands of specialists around the world talking about radiation and health impact. FCC is not responsible for the 5G installation positioning, they said. City is responsible. So we are like moving from FCC to city. And currently I'm living on the Eden neighborhood. On each small pole light, they are installing 3 of each 5G small cells. And FCC metrics are talking about radiation only from the one cell. Question, how is city monitoring the radiation? And if exceed, because for sure exceed, what are the city, how they are happening if it's higher? Also, I asked Abigail about, DC Federal Court ordered all the permit to be revised and to be reconsidered after the environment impact assessment. And I got no answer. So it's a bullshit regarding, public information. I have a petition signed for over 600 people from City of San Jose asking the mayor to do something because.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. We'll see if we can get you some answers there. Why don't we go to Mr. Beekman?
Hi. Blair Beekman here. Thank you for the previous words of the previous speaker. There's a lot of health issues that are involved in the new broadband infrastructure plans at the federal level. Maybe that is suggesting something to all of us. 5G has been introduced to our community in the name of warfare, in the name of a national emergency and global pandemic. I don't think you have to learn the language that, this is not a success story. This is stuff I know you've been planning and practicing for years. This is not a success story. This is a cautionary tale, and you move forward with a guarded, cautious optimism. Used to learn to use terms like that. This is not about success. There is an important concept involved that is vital to all of us and how to bridge the digital divide. There is no denial of that. But this is just another manifestation of the era of 9/11 and warfare. And our city government and governments are just dumping a ton of new technology into our system with no say from the community, barely enough. I really hope that you're practicing the notification process that allows a community to make clear, informed decisions if they want to, argue and protest 5G being placed in the neighborhood. Give them that option. Give them that open public policy choice. Practice those good practices. That's as much as I can ask, and that can do a lot. And there's give and take both ways. Don't railroad this system, man. Make it an open public process. That's the community. That is the love, and that is a sustainable future. Good luck. Thank you.
Thanks for your feedback. Let's come back to the committee, and I believe Councilmember Foley is up first.
I wasn't going to ask this question, but since it was asked by the public, I wonder, Kip, if you could address the radiation and the health effects of the 5G small cells, or Abby, or I'm sorry, Abby, whoever.
I'll actually take a first cut at this.
Okay.
Is, public health is something that we take extremely seriously. Health concerns are not to be taken lightly. There are a couple of things with this. One is that we are preempted by the FCC from making any determinants around health. They have the authority over the permitting of these devices and, in fact, allowing them to go up on the public right of way. What we've done is we've made sure that we have design standards that make sure that the right equipment is going up on the poles, that they're safe in terms of the way the structure of the pole and the electricity of the pole works. We also have design standards to make sure the aesthetics are safe. That being said, I think the one thing where we're probably in agreement with the speakers is we do think that there should be continuing and additional research. We have encouraged that. We are on record on that. We try to keep up with the latest literature, but we, like they, would like to make sure that what we're putting up on the polls is absolutely safe. And if there's an indication that it's not, we'll be the first to come out in opposition to what's going on. But we do believe additional research should be something that the federal government should undertake and undertake rigorously as part of this continued deployment.
Thank you, Kip. Abby, do you want to add anything?
Nope, Kip said it perfectly.
Okay. I appreciate your comments and thank you for the presentation and the report. Installation of the 5G small cell on the street lights in our neighborhoods is one of the most controversial issues that we face as council members. The neighbors are worried about them. They're worried about the side effects. The studies aren't available. They're not long-term studies. They're shorter-term studies. And yeah, the studies show that there's no long-term effects. But I'm really glad to hear that if they're begin to show that we'll take action. And I know this wasn't, and I wasn't on council when this was approved, but I know that there was real controversy and pushback from the mayor when this was implemented and started many years ago. So that's one thing. And I think one way our community gets upset is when they are notified that a small cell tower is going to be installed on a street light right outside their door. And then the contractor or the subcontractor comes out and does work that they weren't anticipating, like putting up a big electrical panel box in front of their house that they were never notified that that was going to happen. So what can we do to make sure that the subcontractors notify our community, our residents who are impacted by the actual construction of these right in front of their homes? Because we're getting a lot of complaints from that.
Well, one is we're always open to learning. So particular complaints, please send them to us and help us learn to improve the system. We've deliberately done a very slimline design so that there aren't extraneous things off to the side. So if there are additional pieces that are being built out, that's not the typical build. And so maybe I'll let Abby answer with a little bit more detail, but I would again, to the extent that you're getting complaints, please send them to us so that we can make sure that we've got them in the system and that we can learn from them as we go forward as well, because there's always opportunity to improve. Abby?
Okay.
Yeah, recently we worked on an update to some of our noticing requirements that allowed for some additional feedback to residents about the type of work that is going to happen, and to also, if the timeline becomes extended, so if it takes longer than a year for the work to get started, that they are messaging again to let the residents know that yes, the small cell is still going to be constructed, and give them a refreshed timeline so that they're kept informed. But I really appreciate your feedback on this particular component, and we will definitely look at what we can do, how we might better coordinate some communication around the type of work happening from the contractors.
Yeah.
And thank you. And as you were talking, Abby, you probably were involved in a couple of complaints that we had in District 9. So I'll follow up offline with you on that. But I'm wondering if, or how much more this would add to your workload to just notify the council members or the council offices when small cell, well, 5G cell towers are going to be installed and where. So we have an idea, so we have a heads up instead of being behind the installation, getting a message saying, hey, this is happening in front of my house right now. If we know ahead of time, then maybe we can sort of proactively address the situation in the community. Is that a lot to add?
Well, I think that's possible. I think we might want to pilot it. You know, just to be clear, it'd be like 1,800 notifications is what we would have done to date.
I was going to ask.
So be careful what you wish for. But I think
right.
I think what I'd like to do is I'll ask Abby to take the lead, and maybe we should sync with you, council member, and do two things in that sync. One, get feedback on some of the issues that you talked about in terms of some of the build out so that we can improve the process there. And then giving Abby and team a little bit of time, think through what maybe an opt-in notification might be for the council members, what that would look like, and see how hard that is to build out. If it's something that we can build out and pilot, we might pilot it with you or other interested council members. But I think, yeah, you getting a notice of things that are going on in your district can often be very helpful. I also know that you have a lot going on in your district, so I don't want to overwhelm. So we'll take a look at that and see kind of how possible that is. I won't opine on this because I'm always a little bit removed from the details, but let's learn how we can do that and see if that's possible.
Thank you. I always like to be ahead of the grocery store conversation, going down the aisle, running into the person who's going to say, hey, why is that thing being installed in front of my house? And I'm quickly trying to think, okay, who is this person I'm talking to? Where do they live? What street are they on? And so if I have a heads up when I do see them, I don't come off as not knowing what they're talking about. We always want to be, we always want to try to appear that we know what they're talking about. So if we have just a little bit of information, it's that grocery store conversation. You know, a lot of us are shopping virtually these days, but we will be back in the stores, and we will be back at schools, and we will be running into people again. So I appreciate that. And so if I look at these, Abby, if I look at the small cells and the macro cells, where will I see, on which streets will I see the macro cell towers?
So the macro cell towers, we don't have a map of where those locations are going to be, but 200 of those are existing sites that are already providing service. It's going to be upgrades to those. So they either have 3G or they just have equipment that needs to be refreshed that's maybe even 4G. So those are going to be on existing poles that are out there in the wild. And they will have 40 new sites, but those new sites are already sites that do house some type of mobile antenna. And so they won't be entirely new. It is, again, kind of an addition, but in terms of the permitting, the way it's viewed as a new site.
Okay. And just a couple other observations, the fiber optic versus cable. I'm glad to see we're going to fiber optic because cable has a tendency of being stolen. Copper cable has a tendency of being stolen, and the fiber optics won't be. So that's great. And I forgot my last question at the very minute, so it must not have been all that important. Thank you very much for your report. I appreciate it. It's good information. And Chair, would you like me to move to accept the report now?
Please, sure.
Okay, then I'll move to accept the report.
Great. Councilmember Cohen, do you feel like seconding?
I'll second it.
Okay, you're up.
Okay. Well, first of all, I thank you for the report. It's great to see some technical information about 5G, and there's a lot of promise to this technology and all the things that people are asking for in their smart devices and infrastructure that we're building as a city. People's smart cars depend on 5G. People's what people do every day is they're so used to having connectivity everywhere they go. 5G will be really crucial for that. My comments were all kind of along the lines of about community perception of 5G. Because we need, for me, it's not really a question of the health risks as much as a question of education and helping the community understand. And obviously, well, I've never been satisfied by the response that, well, the FCC doesn't let us deny it, so that's the way it is. I mean, we should be providing real resources to people about the safety of these low frequency radiations relative to really high frequency radiations where people have a real concern. And so I know people don't often respond well to technical answers, but we probably should have some kinds of simple, I just looked over your site because I didn't even know it was there until now. Some kind of technical information that gives a little bit more about, the relative safety of what we know about these kinds of radiations at these spectra. I've talked to a few technical experts about the idea of putting together community meetings where we bring people out to the community to talk about the safety of 5G and let them know and let them ask questions of technical experts so people can feel more comfortable, because I think that's what people are missing. There have been for years conspiracy theories about the purpose of putting up different towers at different frequencies and the expansion from 3G to 4G to 5G. And this is one of those areas that lends itself to that kind of thinking, and we just need to help educate people. And while I joked before about Kip, about your use of the term shooting beams, obviously, if we phrase things in that manner, then people get concerned. So, I love joking about it, but we have to also be careful about how we talk about this kind of technology. I saw recently, a conspiracy theory about the thermometers that we're using and pointing at people's heads, and the fact that they're shooting beams into people's heads. And so people who don't even want to have their temperature measured as they enter buildings because they're afraid of that technology need a lot of help to understand the safety of 5G technology. Now, I do try to tell people, of course, that the danger they have standing near their microwave oven is greater than the danger from a 5G device outside their home. But people, are still skeptical. It's also important people to know that as you increase the wavelength, the distance over which the field dissipates is shorter. So a 5G device radiation dissipates much closer to the pole than a 4G does, and so pole, outside is not going to have radiation. And plus, these wavelengths don't penetrate walls. I mean, there's a lot of technology, a lot of information people should understand that we're not presenting to people as we proceed. So I just wanted to mention those things, talk about how we should be, providing these presentations. I was thinking, your presentation is a good start as we talk about deploying, but putting some more information about safety in there would be helpful. And then we can maybe share that with our residents.
We'll take another rev at that. I think that's a great piece of feedback. And I think, one of the things we'll work on is I'm not going to quote this chapter and verse because I might get it wrong, but I remember one of the analogies that was really useful for me is how is it relative to the radiation exposure you're getting from carrying around this, right? That's something that people understand as something that pretty much everybody does these days without controversy. And so we'll take another rev at both looking at how we present that information and increasing the amount of content and attention to that. And I think you're absolutely right. People, part of what I love about public engagement is you bring in all of these different perspectives, and we need to both listen to people and make sure that we're really taking into account legitimate concerns they have, and where we believe we've got a position that we're taking grounded on data and evidence, make that case a little more clearly. So I will take that as feedback and look to expand our site. Again, if we could, I think given the way you've described it quite well, it would be helpful if we can iterate a little bit with you and your office on that to make sure we've hit that point. And I'll ask Abby to, as always, take the lead on helping us do that.
Great. Thank you so much. That's it for my comments.
Great, thanks, Councilmember. Great points. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say that the comments and points that Councilmember Foley made are the exact same situation I have in my district. Mariana actually is one of my residents in my district, and I've heard from numerous residents repeatedly, and residents like Mariana have taken me out in the back in the woodshed and given me a once over about this issue. And part of the problem is, you're right, Councilmember Cohen, that just saying that the federal government preempts us if we don't have a choice tends to be our fallback response to the residents. And it's not working for them. It's not working for us. It's not working for staff. And so we have to find a better way, whether that's through education, whether it's pushing for the federal government and the FCC to update their studies, because they haven't done a study in over 10 years. The most recent study is over 10 years. So we're really having this discussion and this debate with really outdated information and data and studies. And that's just not going to be satisfactory for a lot of our residents. And this is not just a few residents. This is a large number of residents, and it's growing every day. There's a lot of misinformation out there that they're getting off of the internet, and we just have to come up with a strategy. And I don't know what all the answers are, but we need to come up with a strategy in terms of how we can get accurate information that we have, how we can get information that's updated, how we can put pressure on the FCC to pursue updated studies, and anything else that we can figure out in terms of how to communicate with the community and how to deploy and roll out these sites. Because I can tell you that it's going to get worse, not better, unless we're able to crack the code. But great input, Councilmember Cohen and Foley, in terms of what we need to do or how we should approach this. So I appreciate that.
If I could, Vice Mayor, just a quick response to that. I think, as I'm again listening and learning here, there has been a shift over the last 12 months or so in terms in our community here around some of the concerns, and I'd say fortunately, there's also been a shift at the administration level, which we have a bit more of a connection into an FCC, which might be a little bit more receptive to some of our concerns and some of our pressure. I would say, for the record, again, if I thought there was a public health issue here, and I thought there was a public health concern, I'd be the first to advocate suing the federal government and the FCC and taking them to court and bringing that to your attention. And so the moment that the data convinces me that we've got that will be my advocacy position. But in the meantime, I think you're absolutely correct, and others speaking are absolutely correct, that the FCC can and should do more to research this well and make sure that the recommendations that they have are in fact completely correct. So we'll kind of redouble our efforts in that regard. We have some good connections into the new administration on this, and some deep expertise on the FCC side with Dolan Beckel, who's currently on a brief leave of absence. When he gets back, he and I will discuss this and see what we can do and work with our lobbyists in Washington on making sure that this continues to be a priority for us as we go forward. So taking that very, very seriously and taking responsibility for following up.
And Kip, if I were just to add here, folks, Benna Chang, as well as Abby and Ann Grabowski here, and myself, we've met with the FCC a few times already. And this was something that was raised in terms of better transparency, more studies done, better communication. But we can follow up more on improving that and see what we can do locally. So.
Great, thanks, Kip. Jordan, Vice Mayor, did you have any other comments?
Just one last comment, that try to leverage what we're doing in terms of our involvement on the the National League of Cities Information Technology and Communications Committee. This is not just a San Jose issue. This is a nationwide issue that all the cities that I'm working with and dealing with are facing some of that same resistance. So try to leverage our involvement with the National League of Cities.
Will do.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. And I think my colleagues covered it well. I was going to focus in the same area. And I'll say, a year and a half ago, out knocking on doors, I was surprised by the number of residents at the door who told me they were concerned about 5G. And I do think, a lot of good ideas were mentioned by my colleagues. I would just certainly echo them all and stress that when someone comes to the city for information about 5G, that we do our best to provide public education and get them to other resources there. And I will admit, I also have not been through the particular subpage of the city website on it, but would just emphasize that we are not just saying it's the FCC making us do it, but that here's the existing research and other places where you can get more information. And I do know studies have been done around the world, so there may be other studies outside of the US we want to point people to. So unless there's anything else, Abby, thanks again for the report. I think we're gonna vote. All right.
Foley?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
Cohen?
Aye.
Mahan?
Aye. All right. 3 great reports today, very substantive. Thanks to city staff and my colleagues for the great conversation. And we are on to open forum, which is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on any issue they would like, including those not covered today. Do we have any public comments? Mr. Beekman.
Hi, thank you. Boy, a really, really great end to that last item. Thank you so much. I wish you guys could talk like that all the time. And thank you. I mean, you made clear that, there is many examples that of local policy being able to take precedence over federal mandates. And it's up to ourselves as a local community to have an intelligent dialogue between all parts of the community to try to figure that out, what that can be, what is the give and take, and just to have an open conversation to make sure to have an open notification process that is clear and understandable and gives people choices. That's 3/4 of the battle right there. That's doing the good work, and that's being a good community. And if you do all of that, which Chappie is saying, that's how you talk about to other people around the country and the LOCC. So, man, really good luck in working in those terms. And that is our future. That is sustainability, and that's working towards sustainability. Thank you. I'm a bit worried that in the way that you were talking about the street racing issue and the need of surveillance technology, ALPRs, like I said, you already have a lot of ALPRs already. I don't think you need many more. And you're also talking about we need to up manpower. We need to, up, police, services for this and this and this. You took a very low-key, laid-back approach to the issue of sideshows, which I find interesting and commendable in ways. Why not continue those good practices, and figure out in mellow ways how to mellow out the community. You've made some good beginning steps. Thank you for that. Keeping the people out, certain people out, and to consider gun use, asking people to not use so many guns in San Jose. That can help a lot. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, Mariana. I think we need you to unmute yourself.
Okay.
There we go.
So I do have 2 questions. I don't know who is going to answer them. The DC Federal Court ordered that before approving a permit, you have to have an environment impacted assessment. And I asked Abby about this, and I haven't seen any environment assessment impact report ever. And how this is part of our process of approving the small cells, apparently nothing. And another question I have, how city, so after deploying the small cells, how is city or who is responsible for monitoring the small cell radiation, and when exceed the approved rate from FCC, what is the process? What will happen? Because Verizon permit, approval for the permit, it's standing there that the current FCC radiation level may be exceeded. And if they upfront recognize that they will exceed the radiation and city approve it with this, what's going to happen when really will exceed when, install in front of my house? Makes sense? Question then again, who is going to respond to me? Thank you.
You to continue to work through your council member's office, and it sounds like you may already be directly in touch with city staff. So I think we'll move the conversation offline from here. And I just want to, again, thank the members of the public who participated in the meeting, city staff for the great reports, and my colleagues for their great questions and comments. And with that, we are adjourned.